The Earth is in a constant state of changing, and the land masses of our glorious home are no exception. Plate tectonics is a theory that Earth's outer shell is divided into several plates which glide over the mantle over an incredibly long period of time. Although this has become widely accepted today and is treated less of like a theory and more like fact, the geography that we see in our world today is only a picture in the history of our world. The world, say, 3 billion years ago would appear drastically different than today. Well, how can we be too sure about the world's appearance 3 billion years ago? Don't you think that's a bit too far, you might be thinking? To be honest, there's no way to tell for certain, but we can get a good idea of what Earth's ancient land looked like by understanding the way plate tectonics move today and then trace their movements back. Today we see the North American, South American, Cocos, Caribbean, Nazca, Easter, Han Ferdinand, Hondi Fuca, Scotia, Antarctic, African, Arabian, Eurasian, Indian, Australian, Filipino, and Pacific plates, just to name some of the major ones. These divisions of the world, however, are anything but constant, as you could have guessed. We see a perfect example of these divisions being made in Ethiopia in consideration with the Somali plate. As you may have heard, in the future this will cause Eastern Africa to become its own separate island. But enough with that. Let's move onward, or rather, backward, whichever you fancy. Valbara. As far as we know, Valbara was the oldest piece of land to exist. It was said to have seen the light of the world 3.2 to 3 billion years ago. Parts of this ancient island today exist in Western Australia and Southern Africa. Moreover, these areas today contain some of the most well-preserved ancient rocks and molecular fossils which can be found. Not that much is really known about Valbara as well. I think you get the point on why. No, I'm not talking about the ancient city in Mesopotamia. Its name comes from the German prefix meaning original, because at the time it was the oldest known continent. Most of the land which existed was a part of Valbara also, which eventually became would be more of a big brother to Valbara. It existed from 3 to 2.8 billion years ago, and similarly to Valbara, it contains part of Australia and Africa. Today, this beast is classified as the oldest confirmed landmass. Canora Land. Our friend Canora Land existed from 2.7 to 2.6 billion years ago. It composed of parts of North America, Greenland, Scandinavia, and a little bit of Africa and Australia. This was the first major piece of land which some of today's northern lands existed in, and in sort of an ironic way, the continent was very equatorial with mainly bacteria thriving on the land. Arctica. Valbara is to as Canora Land is to Arctica. Arctica is basically an extension of what the smaller Canora Land was, although the island additionally had more parts of North America. It picked up where Canora left off 2.6 billion years ago and lasted until 2.4 billion years ago. Arctica, although being equatorial, got its name because the Arctic Ocean was formed by the separation of Siberia and North America. Now, for the next 0.3 billion years, the world's land was scattered as tiny islands after Arctica's breakup. It should be noted that in this time we saw a rise to land which would become part of Africa, and for the first time, South America. Atlantica. Again, no, I'm not talking about Atlantica online. I'm talking about the Goliath of a continent which existed from 2.1 to 1.8 billion years ago. Most of the land which formed during the previous 0.3 billion years ago in the southern hemisphere collided to form the biggest continent in Earth's history at this point. It composed of a large portion of Western Africa and South America. Nina. Nina is to Colombia as Laurasia is to Pangaea. Nina would be the northern counterpart to Atlantica, the smaller and younger of the two, which existed from 1.9 to 1.8 billion years ago. It consisted of parts of modern-day North America, the motherland, Siberia, and Scandinavia. Colombia. Eventually, Atlantica and Nina combined to form the great continent of Colombia, which existed from 1.8 to 1.35 billion years ago. The motherland sat on top of North America, with Australia to the west, and to the south you would find Scandinavia and Siberia. Going south from that, you would run into Africa, then South America. Rodinia. Next we have Rodinia, which existed from 1.1 to 0.8 billion years ago. Now Rodinia was mainly desert-like with vast plains covering the horizon as far as the eyes could see. The motherland, just under Australia and India, lay west as an island, with Africa and North America having South America, Baltica, and Siberia below it. This continent caused the Earth to absorb less heat, which in turn plunged the world into freezing temperatures. This was called one of many snowball Earths. Pangaea. Now we are getting somewhere familiar. Pangaea lay almost entirely in the southern hemisphere, hence the name. The behemoth of a continent existed from 700 to 600 million years ago. Modern-day Australia would sit as king of the map, with India and the motherland below it. Then, below that, you would run into Africa, and going western from there, you would hit South America, North America, Siberia, then Europe. Gondwana. Gondwana existed from 550 to 300 million years ago. It contained part of modern-day Africa, South America, the motherland, India, and Australia. Gondwana was the bigger of the two continents which existed at the time, which brings me to talking about the aforementioned Laurasia. Gondwana and Laurasia are seen as the dynamic duo of the continents of the ancient past. Laurasia is seen as the northern counterpart to Gondwana. As you could have guessed by this point, the ancient beast existed from 600 to 300 million years ago. Laurasia, along with Gondwana, saw rise to some of the most notable land species, such as various types of insects and reptiles. Pangaea. Eventually, as you may have predicted, the duo combined to form our good old pal Pangaea. Pangaea existed from 300 to 150 million years ago, and was surrounded by a giant ocean called the Pangaea Ocean. East Asia existed in the far north, with Europe and North America to the south. If you were to go even further south, then you would find South America, Africa, India, Australia, and the motherland. It is interesting to note that parts of Asia were scattered as islands throughout the Telesis Sea. Eventually, Pangaea broke apart, leading to our modern world, as you might have guessed just by looking at the map once. About 200 million years ago, North America separated from Europe, then the African west coast. From here on out, her course has been set on going west. We can also observe the clockwise rotation of Eurasia from this point on out. About 150 million years ago, North America broke off of all Pangaea to become her own island, as Australia, India, and the motherland collectively decided to go south together. About 110 million years ago, Africa and South America finally disconnected to go their own separate ways, north and west respectively. India, Australia, and Madagascar all thought it would be a good idea to ditch the motherland and go back north. About 70 million years ago is at the point where you can really start to see the path at which the continents have themselves set on going. The Americas have their minds on heading west, while Australia goes north along with Africa and India. Lastly, as I've mentioned before, Eurasia continues to rotate clockwise. About 40 million years in the past, we saw New Zealand split from Australia as Greenland splits from North America. And just as this division is going on, India makes a collision with southern Asia. A beautiful sight to see. Now, about 4 million years ago, Africa connects with Asia, and the Great Lakes are formed. With that, we are left with our modern world. But what is the real use of holding all this information if we are not able to apply it? As I've stated before, knowing and understanding how our modern-day plate tectonics and continental movements work will help us determine our landmass's future. In simpler terms, that just means I'm going to discuss the future. It is hypothesized that the continents will merge again into a continent called Pangaea Proxima. As I've said before, Africa is on her journey north and will eventually close off the Mediterranean. forming a huge mountain range in its place. Along with Africa, Australia is also traveling northward to ditch Antarctica. The Americas will continue to head west, as Eurasia will, you guessed it, continue to spin clockwise to perfectly work with Africa. In 20 million years, all major lakes and inland seas will close off, including our beloved Great Lakes. The Somali Lake, which I mentioned before, will break off from the African plate to cause Eastern Africa to form its own island. In 60 million years, North America will drift to cover the North Pole, forcing the Arctic Sea to head south. At this time, Australia will have traveled so far north that it is predicted to smash right into Taiwan. In 100 million years, Alaska will have connected once again with Siberia, connecting all the continents except the motherland. I mean, the party really hasn't arrived yet. And speaking of the motherland, I think you already know what I'm about to say. In 135 million years, the Americas would have changed their long set course and started heading east, taking a giant piece of Siberia with them. At this point, the eastern half of the motherland would have already approached and closed off the Indian Ocean as an inland sea. In 220 million years, North America's eastern coast would have already collided with Western Africa. South America and the western portion of the motherland would have already approached and made up the southern edge of the newly formed continent, Pangaea Proxima. Pangaea Proxima will eventually break apart as all the greats do, but it is uncertain what will happen next, whether it be the sun's luminosity increasing or whatnot. Tell me what you think though, and give me ideas on what I should cover next. The future geomagnetic pole reversal, history discussions, anything is on the table really. And with that, like, subscribe, and have a good day. See you later.